Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, and every week we bring you the story of people who, in the way they see the world and work with others, are improving the lives of people near and far. They do this locally, globally, and digitally. We do this as a part of our work within the organization called Rotary. You can learn more at rotary.org, but at core, it's an organization devoted to service, that joy and meaning that come from helping others. You can learn about our club in particular by going to rotary.cool, and we're real proud of that. So, if there is something that you find in today's message that you want to share with others, please feel free to do so. If you're curious about the different things we do, we welcome you contacting us. We are especially excited to have speaking to us today a legend of Silicon Valley, Guy Kawasaki. He is currently the chief evangelist of Canva. He is very famous for having been the chief evangelist of Apple at one point, and a guy who has many wonderful stories to tell and insights related to how business can function all the more effectively in an ever-changing world. To read the full bio, feel free to pause this recording wherever you are listening to it. It might be happening on our podcast page, it might be happening on our YouTube page or on our club page, but regardless, we've got more info for you there. Guy, we are so happy to have you. Welcome to the Rotary E-Club of Silicon
Well,
Valley.
thank you very much. And, Elton and I go way back. I mean, prior century back. I mean, way back. So it's a pleasure to remake that connection with you, Elton. So here we go, right? And congratulations on being a grandparent or almost being a grandparent. I just crossed that Rubicon about 9 months ago, too. So, yeah. Fire up that generating skipping trust fund, Elton. All right. So, my topic today is what I think are the most common and perhaps dangerous misconceptions of business. And, my filter, my area of expertise is technology in Silicon Valley. As you heard, I work for Apple. I started a venture capital firm. I returned to Apple, and now I'm chief evangelist of Canva, and I'm host of the Remarkable People podcast. So I have come up against a lot of misconceptions and a lot of problems. So I'm going to rip through that because I didn't realize I only have 10 to 12 minutes. I mean, that's less than TEDx, my goodness. So it takes me 10 to 12 minutes to tell all my opening jokes, but that's okay. I'm going to spare the jokes today. So here we go. All right. So the first misconception I want to talk about is that everybody thinks it's always about the idea. And the older I get, the more I think it's about the implementation of the idea. And I've come to believe that ideas are easy and implementation is hard. And I think the older you get and the more you see what happens, you understand that, ideas are easy. It's the implementation that's hard. That's number one. Number two is, I think, a very flawed line of reasoning. And I think you're seeing it happening right now in America, that shareholders reign supreme, and they reign supreme and they are very impatient. So you basically do whatever it takes to make as much money as possible for the shareholders in the short run. And I think that a good management team is much more nuanced in their motivation. It's not just the shareholders, it's also society, it's employees, it's customers. It's a lot of factors. You don't just do everything for the shareholders because you're likely to be led askew, to put it mildly. And I think you're seeing that right now with all the tech bros in Silicon Valley, and all they seem to want to do is make short-term returns for their shareholders. That's number two. Number three is that many people believe that to start a company, you need a quote unquote proven team. And I almost violently disagree with this. If you look at the great tech companies, they never started out with a proven team. Like Steve and Wozniak were hardly proven. They weren't even graduates of college. I mean, it. If you look at the great companies, they were two guys in a garage, two gals in a garage, a guy and a gal in a garage, and they didn't know what the hell they were doing, which is actually empowering. So I would not always be looking for this proven team who right now, if you're starting a company, you say, I want a proven team. I'm going to get a vice president from Apple. I'm going to get a CXO from Google. I'm going to get a product manager from Facebook because they're a proven team. And while venture capitalists may salivate over that team, if you really think about it, what the hell do those three people know about starting a company? They work for companies with infinite resources, with infinite brand awareness, with infinite employees, with infinite everything. And now you're going to turn them into a team that has $500,000 in seed capital, and you expect this VP from Google or CXO from Apple to understand, yeah, I know how to roll up my sleeves. That person had a personal assistant who had a personal assistant who had a personal assistant. And now you're going to tell that person, guess what, guys? Guess what, gals? You're going to eat what you killed. They haven't killed anything for 20 years. Number four is that you should focus on the pitch as you're building a company. And I cannot tell you how stupid I think that is, because there are many people who go so far astray that they believe that the whole function of a company is to raise money. And that is such a flawed idea. The purpose of a company is to create customers. Now, to create customers, you need to create a product. And to create a product, you need money. But the goal is the customer and the product. It isn't raising money. And I would argue that as soon as you raise money, which many people believe, oh, the hard part is done, we got the money. When you get the money, the hard part starts. It's not the end of the process. It's just the beginning. So don't focus on the pitch. Focus on the prototype. Number five is people love to blow smoke about how we have this great partnership. We have this partnership with Microsoft, Google, IBM, Oracle, Salesforce.com. And, because we have a partnership that's going to ensure our success. And I tell you something, I think that partnership is a total bullshit word. And the time that you use the word partnership is when you cannot use the S word. And the S word is sales. Because if you don't have sales, then you have to blow smoke about your partnerships. And so I truly do believe that one conception that I want you to embrace is that sales fixes everything. And if you have sales, you don't need to blow bullshit about partnerships. You don't need to use the S word, which is strategic. You just get sales. It's all about making sales. As long as you have sales and revenue, you're still in the game. And a partnership, I'll give you a very tactical test for a partnership. If you're in an organization that is announcing a partnership and no one has opened up Excel and recalculated financial results, your partnership is bullshit. Because if you have a partnership that's really for real, either costs are going to go down or sales are going to go up. So you need to recalculate your spreadsheet. But if you haven't touched your spreadsheet and you've announced the partnership, it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. Number 6, I bet you never had a presentation like this at this Rotary Club meeting, huh? Yeah. Are you going to throw Elton out of this for suggesting this? What can I say, Elton? You opened the door. What can I say? Number six is that you really need to be well-financed and raise a ton of money to succeed. I would make the case that too much money is worse than too little. Because when you have too much money, you start thinking sloppy. You start thinking that money is going to keep coming in forever. You start believing that your venture capitalists really like you and they're going to be there for you and they're going to be there for round after round because they believe in your potential. Oh my God. And then you start announcing strategic partnerships and you're not too worried about sales because we have so much money and the venture capitalists believe in us so much. Holy cow. Whatever you do when you encounter that situation, don't lie too much. Otherwise, you're going to be sharing a cell with Elizabeth Holmes. All right. So you don't need to raise a ton of money. And I would make the posit that bootstrapping is good for the soul, and it forces you to think smarter, think harder, and work harder. Number seven is this concept like, let's fail fast, let's fail often. Failure isn't a problem. Our venture capitalist gave us all this money, and I read this book where this guy said, or this gal said, fail fast and pivot. And they kind of have this attitude, a cavalier attitude towards failure, like, it's okay to fail because we can pivot and we can get more money for the next round. I'm telling you, you should fight failure with every ounce of your soul, because failure is very damaging. It's damaging to your ego. It's damaging to your confidence. It's damaging to people's lives. You are wasting money, and money is not something to waste. I don't care how much you have. So yeah, so this, you should fail never. But if you do fail, at least you should be learning something so that you fail at least in a different way next time, not the same way. Number eight is that the customer is always right. Well, I would emphasize the word always there, because there's nothing that's always true. And, if anything that Apple and Steve Jobs prove is that the customer doesn't know when he or she is right. And, if you were to ask the Apple customer back in 1983, what do you want from Apple? They would have said, better, faster, cheaper, Apple II. Better, faster, cheaper, Apple IIe. They would not have said, well, why don't you give me a computer that has no software, has a one-button mouse with a trash can that has WYSIWYG menu items and WYSIWYG icons, and is totally incompatible with every piece of software that I own. Nobody would have described that. But that's what Steve Jobs and the Macintosh division did. So I'm telling you that I'm not saying you should intentionally take what your customer says and do the opposite. I'm just saying that the customer is not always right. And usually they can only frame what they want from you in terms of what they're already getting from you. So if they're getting a gas-powered car, they're going to ask you for a gas-powered car. If they're getting an Apple II built on Apple II DOS, they're going to ask you for another Apple II that's bigger or faster or cheaper. And nobody's going to help you jump the curve. You have to jump the curve by yourself. Number nine is, you should have this blitz scaling, and scaling fast is good. And, it's a race, and, it's a land grab, and, get all the money and grab as much as you can. Of course, there are examples where that worked. But the problem is when you hear those kinds of examples where they blitz scale, you need to always ask yourself this question. And I would say you need to ask yourself this question in every regard that I'm mentioning today. So like if you read this example of some business book written by Walter Isaacson of how this company blitzscaled and now is worth $1 trillion, and the CEO is, at the inauguration and handing out gold and glass trophies to the president and all that. And you think, oh my God, that's the way to do that. We got to blitzscale. We got to go really fast. Well, when you see a situation like that, you have to ask yourself, what's missing? And what's missing is, well, what about the companies that blitzscaled and failed? You never hear about them. And what about the companies that did not blitzscale, but they put one foot in front of the other and it took them 10 or 20 years to achieve success? You don't hear about those companies either because it's not as an exciting story. And so you need to always ask what's missing. I'll use an education analogy. So you often hear this theory that, you don't need to go to college. Steve Jobs didn't finish college. Bill Gates didn't finish college. Mark Zuckerberg didn't finish college. Look at those three examples. You don't need to finish college. You ask yourself what's missing. So how many people who didn't go to college didn't succeed? And how many people who did go to college did succeed? And I'll give you one little data point. If you look at the Fortune 500 CEO suites, every one of those CEOs went to college. So maybe going to college is a pretty good idea. The probability that you are the next Zuckerberg, Gates, or Jobs is pretty low. You need to play the probability there. Number 10. Number 10 is the only thing that truly matters is the person's intelligence, right? So, that's all Google interviews, right? You got to be a PhD from Carnegie Mellon or Stanford or Harvard, and they're checking your IQ score, they're checking your SATs and your GPA because intelligence is everything. And my observation is that while intelligence is an important factor, I'm not saying you should go hire dumb people, but I'm telling you, you need to check two more things. First, does the person have a growth mindset? So even if you're intelligent, you can have a fixed mindset. The fixed mindset means that, yeah, I'm great at computer science, but I don't want to risk my reputation trying anything else. So I'm only going to stick to computer science. That is a fixed mindset. A growth mindset means, yeah, I'll try different things. I'm good at physics, but I'm going to try surfing, at an extreme. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, like, in addition to the growth mindset, I hope you find people with the grit mindset. And the grit mindset means that you can persevere, because victory and success is not easy, not for anybody. And so you have to have a grit mindset that you will just keep coming back and coming back. And I'm telling you, at the end of the day, the successful companies have outlasted the other companies. They didn't outspend the other companies, and they didn't outthink the other companies. They outlasted the other companies. And grit is just as important as intelligence. And I believe that brings us to number 11. And number 11, I would make the case that entrepreneurs are born, not made. And I think that is a massive oversimplification. That I think that entrepreneurs are made. They are made when they notice something is wrong with the world, that something can be done better, that somebody's poorly served or something like that. But, I, it takes the empathy to understand what people need. And maybe sometimes it just drops in your lap, but it's not like, you've got to have this certain DNA to be an entrepreneur. There's all kinds of entrepreneurs. And again, not everybody's a Steve Jobs. In fact, I can't think of anybody else who's Steve Jobs. So entrepreneurs, they are made. They are not born. Now, every once in a while, you get what Seth Godin would call the purple cow or the black swan or whatever. Yeah, there are some people who are born entrepreneurs, but I think the vast majority of entrepreneurs are made, not born. So that's my 11 counterintuitive, misconceived thoughts for you today.
That is wonderful, Guy. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness. I'm going to do the quick introduction of our team here, and then what we'll do is we'll jump into Q&A. So, our immediate past president in the Sacramento area, Mike Kane. Our immediate past president in Vancouver, Nick Lagarde. Our podcasting guru, Elton Sherwin, here in the Bay Area. Joining us from Zimbabwe is Sviatko Shidorov. Good to see you, Sviatko. And then also here in the Bay Area, our club secretary, Terry Schinkel, and her very cool husband, Jeff. So, with that, let's start into this. There are so many good thoughts that are part of how you built this particular talk. And as you think about people whose goal is to improve communities, is there a particular piece of that lineup that you would say, that's where a lot of people who want to do charitable work effectively, sustainably, should really pay a special attention?
I would say that, well, for this specific question, can I just throw in a number 12 then?
Do it. Absolutely.
All right. So I would say for this specific question of, building and doing highly effective, if not remarkable, charitable work, the most important quality is, at the very least, you should see what you're trying to fix in person. You should see what people are going through. And that sounds like a duhism, but even better would be that you be the person that the charity is addressing. And so, I'll use an example. This is a concept from Toyota that they believe, when something's wrong on the factory floor, you don't just read the report or you look at the executive benchmarks. You actually go to the factory floor and see what the hell's going wrong. I would take that one step further. And if you really wanted to understand the factory floor, you go and work on the factory floor as a factory worker. I'll give you another example of this. One of my friends, his name is Martin Lindstrom, and he had a client that was a pharmaceutical company, and they said they wanted to be closer to the customer. And closer to the customer, that's when McKinsey hears, ka-ching, $5 million, because we're going to do market research for this Fortune 500 companies and tell them how to be closer to the customer. But what he did is he spent far less than $5 million. He bought everybody in their executive retreat a straw, and he made them breathe through the straw. And after a few minutes, he said, "You want to get closer to the customer? I just made you into the customer, because a lot of your customers have asthma." And that's a pretty good simulation of what it's like to live with asthma. So now you know what people with asthma are going through. You're a pharmaceutical company. You need to fix that problem. So that's being the customer.
That's powerful. And in talking about that, you were talking about something that you have in mountains, which is experience with effective leaders, people who are using stories well, people who are designing experiences well. Are there other examples like that that you would point to that would help people kind of better think their ability to inspire a group to be more effective?
Well, first of all, I would disagree that I have mountains of experience with leaders like that. There are not a lot of mountains like that. I, and I am a mere hill in that mountain range. Um, um, so the question is better leadership, right? Well, better leadership, just like better charitable work, it starts with empathy, right? So do you understand what you're putting your employee through? That's number one. Number two is, I think that, you know, the the CEOs of the company, and then people who appreciate and understand and agree with those core values join the company. And as the old Jewish saying is, that when a fish gets rotten, the head stinks first. So if you are a CEO of a company and you're trying to instill these great values and you don't set a great example, guess what? You are going to stink first. So what this leader has to do is, the leader has to set the tone for everything, and people are watching you. And if you're saying, well, I want cost cutting. So, everybody from now on has to fly coach. And then you see your leader taking the private jet. That's not going to fly too well. I mean, that's the very poor core value. So you are, whether you like it or not, that's why you get the big bucks. You set the core values, and you should absolutely be an example of those core values. So that's one thing. And the second thing I would say is that you need to be a very good storyteller, because stories are much more powerful than facts. as we've seen in the last 8 months, you can twist a fact to prove anything you want, but a story is much more powerful. And you should also be cognizant on the receiving end of a story that a story is so much more powerful. It may mask the facts. So you need to be skeptical too, right? Uh, but you need to be a very good storyteller. And this is where Steve Jobs excelled. I don't ever remember him saying, yeah, the personal computer business is forecasted to grow 15% year over year, blah, blah, blah. He was talking about one guy, one gal using one computer and being more productive and creative. It was a story of, now people always wanted to write a book. You can write a book with desktop publishing and Alta's PageMaker. It wasn't about the statistics of how large the publishing business is, because quite frankly, back then, the publishing business was limited by old school analog publishers. So storytelling and empathy, I think, are the key.
Talking about stories and writing, the presence of AI is something that led one of our members to send in a question just a few days ago about privacy and AI. And you think about companies that have these policies. These privacy policies can be ridiculously long. Do you imagine that AI can be used by people who are just the yous and me's of the world to be able to begin to discover the kind of scary parts of these policies that everyone says they've read, right? Is that something that in the work you've done, you've run across ideas related to that?
Well, wait, are you saying that AI is a threat to privacy? Are you taking the negative perspective on this?
AI represents, kind of plenty of potential for good and bad. I think her question is more, can people use AI as a way of dealing with the issues that are out there related to privacy policies and the stuff that one should be skeptical about?
No, for sure. I mean, okay. Maybe this will be the last question, because when you hear what I say, you're gonna think, oh God, well, we should have quit while we were ahead. There is no greater believer in AI than Guy. I truly do believe that AI may be the only thing that can save society at this point. It certainly isn't male leaders that's going to save society. So I'm willing to bet on women and AI. Now, it seems to me that, in a sense, AI with its hallucinations reflects the body of knowledge that's been scanned into AI. So yeah, AI has hallucinations, but quite frankly, so do our leaders. And so I think the way you look at it is you got to compare apples against apples. And a lot of these scary articles, they're comparing apples against oranges, and they're saying, well, AI could take over our nuclear weapons and they could launch a war and it'd be the end of the earth and the end of the society. We cannot have AI do that. Well, you're comparing the worst of AI, which it could do that, but you're using the best case of mankind. But quite frankly, if you said to me, Guy, we have nuclear weapons in this world, they're not going to go away. So here's a multiple choice test, Guy. Who can launch a nuclear weapon? Here are the choices: Vladimir Putin, Netanyahu, Kim Jong-un, Donald Trump, or ChatGPT. I hate to tell you, I would pick ChatGPT from that multiple choice test, right? And so I am, again, I grant you that it has hallucinations. And whenever I use ChatGPT, I also ask Gemini the same question, because I want to see, who's hallucinating. And I think if you ask two LLMs, you're going to get it covered. But I will use a story from Blaise Pascal. And Blaise Pascal had this theory that, you know what, if you just look at it very rationally, it's probably smart to believe in the existence of God. Because if you are right and God exists, you got it made. And if you are wrong and God does not exist, so what? What's the downside? If you believed in God and you let this belief in God influence how you behave, hopefully for the better, so because you didn't want to experience the wrath of God, and then you die and you find out there's no God. That was all good my whole life for nothing. I didn't have to do that. Well, what's the downside of that? So my take on AI is, listen, you should assume AI is for real. You should assume AI is going to have all these powers and all this. And if it does, hallelujah, you figured out how to use AI, you figured out how to control AI, you figured out how to profit from AI, you figured out how to optimize AI. And if it's not true, so what? You probably behaved better, you had better privacy boundaries, you had, increase in skepticism, you had increase in utilization this of things, you figured out better ways to power AI using cleaner fuels, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end of your life, oh, AI was bullshit. I didn't even know. But look at all the good things you did when you were wrong. So that's my Blaise Pascal argument for trust in AI.
Well, I love that you went from AI to God and back. That's powerful. You have had quite a career. Is there something that you would say you are most proud of, or that for you was most personally meaningful?
I would say that I am most proud of and most personally meaningful thing is that I am still married to wife 1.0 and I have 4 happy children. That's it. That's my greatest accomplishment. Well, arguably, my wife had more to do with it with me, but that as I look back, yeah, that's what brings me the greatest joy.
Well, there's a lot to be said for understanding one's blessings, that's for sure. As a last question, tell us about why you love surfing.
Well, I love surfing. And first of all, I took up surfing at 60. I'm 71 now. So I do not advise you wait until 60. So you should probably start earlier. The earlier, the better. I love surfing because it is something that it's the biggest challenge I've ever faced because there are so many variables. And, it, I guess you could say that skiing has as many variables, but to go skiing, you got to drive 6 hours. You get stuck in the putting on chains. You got to stand in line for the lift ticket. You got to get in line. You got to get up the hill. You fall down. You come down. You go back down. In surfing, I live in Santa Cruz. I 400 steps from here. I can surf anytime I want. And once you buy your surfboard, it's not like you're buying lift tickets and that. And in surfing, it's all consuming, especially if you're old and lousy, because with surfing, you have to keep track of the wave. You have to keep the height of the wave, the speed of the wave, the direction of the wave. You have to keep track of the tide. You have to keep track of, is there a lot of Hep C in the water this week? You have to keep track of the other people in the water. You have to keep track of your board because most likely you're going to get hurt by your board. There are so many variables. There's the length of the board, the width of the board, the shape of the board, the fin, the size of the fin, the shape of there's infinite number of variables. And so it's all encompassing. And, that when you are surfing, you're not exactly thinking about, well, how should I pitch my company to raise $5 million? Because I guess if I got really good, I could do that. But I'll let you know if I reach that point before I die. I'm not confident that I'm going to do that. So that's why I love surfing, and I surf almost every day.
Well, may you have many, many more days to be able to enjoy that for sure. I'll hand it back to you for a final word in just a minute. But for everyone who has joined us for this recording, whether as a video or as a podcast, we thank you for spending your time looking to be inspired to how you can see the world in ways that will allow you to help others and experience the joy and meaning that comes from that. If you are interested in learning more about Rotary, by all means, check us out online at rotary.cool. We would love to hear from you about the different things you encounter on our site and the different messages that people give as a part of these recordings. As we always like to do, we hand it back to our speaker for the final word.
Yeah.
So, Guy, what would you like people to say as they finish up this podcast or video?
Well, first of all, I didn't know there was a top line domain called .cool. So that, I learned something today. Yeah. Um, I leave you with this thought that, at the end of our lives, we're all reduced to about 65 cents worth of chemicals, right? And that doesn't matter whether you're a trillionaire, billionaire, or homeless. And so I ask people that what should be top of mind. I would divide life into three stages. First, you're underpaid and overworked. Then you're overpaid and underworked. And then you pay back. So the order is you learn, you earn, and then you return. So many of you are probably in the return stage. And so what I ask you to consider is, hypothetically, what are people going to say as they eulogize you? I think that is the acid test for life. Now, if you believe that your eulogy is going to be, well, he made crypto really successful, or he made the long-term capital gains tax very low, that's what we remember him for, I suggest to you that you are an insipid loser. And what your eulogy should be about is, how did you make the world a better place? How did you help people? How did you help environment? How did you help animals? How did you do anything? Like, I want, when I die, I want people to say that I empowered them to make the world a better place. With my Rotary Club appearances, with my investment, with my writing, with my speaking, with my podcasting. That's what I want them to say, that Guy empowered me.
Beautifully said. Everyone should check out the Remarkable People podcast and the Inspiring Solutions podcast, and we will see you next week.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.